Appamada and its programs are supported by your generosity, and your generosity and support makes such a difference. You can find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for unmuting me. Again, welcome to friends in Austin, to friends in New York, or I think Geneva's in New York, and Vancouver, British Columbia, in Switzerland, and other places that I don't even know about, and also to Olivia in Santa Fe. Olivia, I'm going to come up and have coffee with you someday. Um, so I want to give a talk today that I've been thinking about for a while. I composed this yesterday afternoon. It's the second day of the monsoon season here in Albuquerque. It's come very early. And what that means is that the weather is cooler and rainy after a period of 100-degree days, very dry, and a big change that is part of a global weather pattern. And it, it has made it possible for me to be outside more and to really enjoy the opportunities for being outside in Albuquerque. It's quite amazing what's going on. Right now it's about 64 degrees. It's overcast, although the sun's coming out. I have a little garden in my front patio, and it's covered with bees, bumblebees, and it looked like honeybees and maybe some other types of flying insects. So it's quite a wonderful thing to be able to share. So what this has put me in mind of is the beautiful poem about living a simple life as a Zen practitioner, the Song of the Grass Roof Hermitage, which I'm now going to share on screen. And I would ask you to read along with me silently. If you have a copy, the folks in the Zendo can read from the chant book, and if you do not have a chant book, you can read it on the screen with me here. So this is the Song of the Grass Roof Hermitage by Sekito Kisen, and I've been also reading a wonderful book. It's not going to show up on the screen here very well. It's by Ben Connolly. It's called Inside the Grass Hut, Living Shito's Classic Zen Poem. So the Japanese version of Shito's name is Sekito Kisen. So we've read this maybe a dozen times in the time that I've been at Appamada over the last decade or more, and it gets more beautiful each time. So he begins, I've built a grass hut where there's nothing of value. After eating, I relax and enjoy a nap. When it was completed, fresh weeds appeared. Now it's been lived in, covered by weeds. The person in the hut lives here calmly, not stuck to inside, outside, or in between. Places worldly people live, he doesn't live. Realms worldly people love, he doesn't love. Though the hut is small, it includes the entire world. In 10 feet square, an old man illumines forms in their nature. A Mahayana bodhisattva trusts without doubt. The middling or lowly can't help wondering, will this hut perish or not? Perishable or not, the original master is present, not dwelling north or south, east or west. Firmly based on steadiness, it can't be surpassed. A shining window below the green pines. Jade palaces or vermilion towers can't compare with it. Just sitting with head covered, all things are at rest. Thus, this mountain monk doesn't understand at all. Living here, he no longer works to get free. Who would proudly arrange seats trying to entice guests? Turn around the light to shine within, then just return. The vast, inconceivable source can't be faced or turned away from. Meet the ancestral teachers. Be familiar with their instructions. Bind grasses to build a hut, and don't give up. Let go of hundreds of years and relax completely. Open your hands and walk innocent. Thousands of words, myriads interpretations, are only to free you from obstructions. If you want to know the undying person in the hut, don't separate from this skin bag here and now. So here are some reflections from Ben Connolly. Part of his, it's a start. I'm picking up about halfway through the book, Inside the Grass Hut. It's chapter 13. Life and death is the great matter. Will this hut perish or not? It seems pretty clear that this hut will collapse, doesn't it? It's made of grass. It's not going to last forever. And anyway, why is this something we should wonder about? It's not such a big deal, just a hut. But she too is making another shift in the fluid views of identity presented in this poem. This hut has become ourselves. He says people wonder whether the hut will perish or not because the hut is now a name for the self, for the place in which we live, for whatever we call ourselves. We construct the self and we live in it. It's our abode. The question of whether we live on or die after the body stops functioning runs throughout human culture. Christianity promises eternal life after the death of the body. Many Buddhists believe that after death we are reborn in other forms. Many secularists believe the self ends when the physical processes of life cease in the body. Lots of answers have been presented and believed, but the presence of so many answers makes it seem like a big open question to me still. Seeing the pain associated with death was one of the principal things that set the Buddha on the path to try and find a way beyond suffering. And it was not long after my father's death, this is Ben Connolly, that I set foot on the Zen path, trying to deal with the pain. When death comes to someone close to us, we touch one of the most difficult and painful aspects of being human. The dissatisfaction that follows impermanence is in its most harsh and stark relief. It's as if no matter how strong or consoling your beliefs, still some part of you cannot be assuaged in the face of this reality. As someone who was raised humanist, Ben Connolly writes, with the belief that death is a final and irrevocable end to the self, I've often wondered whether dealing with death would be easier with the idea of an eternal hereafter. But from observing people, I can't say that I really know. Shito doesn't seem to know whether or not things die. This is a question he doesn't answer. He doesn't even ask it, actually, only saying that the middle or lowly might be worried about the fate of the hut, which is odd. It seems pretty clear that we die, right? There are lots of ideas about what happens after death, but what kind of person would claim that there is no death? As someone who stood in the room while my father's body went from warm to cold, I can tell you it seemed very clear that death had occurred. But I'll tell you something else. As I walk around on the face of this earth, saying things just like my father used to say, in a voice very much like his, seeing thoughts and views that my father held that then appear in my own mind, it's not so clear to me that death has occurred. In Genjo Koan, Dogen tells us that we may think we aren't enlightened, but we are. Very encouraging. He says, when you first seek Dharma, you imagine that you are far away from its environs, but Dharma is already constantly and correctly transmitted. You are immediately your original self. He then explains that this is true because we are impermanent, that though we may think we are a continuous being looking out of our hut, perhaps, at a changing world, there is no fixed resting place in any abode. There is only change. He then points out that since we are just change, rather than a fixed thing, we can't die, because we were never really born in the first place. We are not things separate from anything, things with brief, impermanent lives. There is only an unknowable, infinite, interdependent process of transience, of the universe realizing itself. Or, we might say, there is only realization, enlightenment. To sum up, you're enlightened because you don't exist. So you don't have to worry about dying because you were never born. This sounds very heady, but Dogen then goes on to give a very simple instruction in the midst of it all. Practice intimately and return to where you are. This is the means by which we can see that nothing at all has an unchanging self. How we can see we are just an aspect of infinite transformation. This is the path to seeing beyond birth and death. So here we have Dogen. Here's Ben Connolly quoting Dogen saying, focus on the here and now. And in the poem, the last lines are, if you want to know the undying person in the hut, don't separate from the skin bag here and now. So there's these echoes throughout the Zen teaching from the Buddha's day down to the present. And they bring us back to the same point. To practice the Buddha way, this is Ben Connolly in a later chapter. To practice the Buddha way is simple. Just come home to the present moment, to the here and now. Even in the earliest days of Buddhism, there were already thousands of teachings, but Buddha instructed that there is one practice that can open up the freedom and wisdom offered by all of them: mindfulness of the body through mindfulness of breath. To be mindful of breath is beautiful and powerful in and of itself, but it is also a technique that allows the mind to rest in the present, in this place, in the body, to truly taste the essential movement of our body that allows us to be, to see how what we think of as outside comes into us and sustains us, and how we give it right back without any planning or reviewing required. In this very moment, air that has been all across the universe and coalesced around our planet is in the process of becoming an essential part of your existence, and the air leaving your body that is an inseparable part of everything then becomes an inseparable part of everything else. Shitu's final instruction to realize timeless intimacy and arrive at the deep peace he shows throughout his poem is for us to just realize this body in this place at this time. A couple of my friends love Shitu's use of the term skin bag here in this last line. It's a little laugh to remind us not to take ourselves too seriously, but sometimes people find it a bit harsh and jarring. After all, the beauty and ease of the earlier lines in his poem, the poem then takes on a rough edge here at the end. This is actually a very old and powerful lesson. The idea of seeing the body as a skin bag goes back to the earliest Buddhist teachings. In the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness Sutra, just after we learn mindfulness of breath, the Buddha teaches us to be aware of the body as a bag of skin holding all kinds of nasty stuff. Yuck. We need this line to remind us that when we are comfortable, it's good to stay in the moment without holding on to the feeling. And when we are uncomfortable, which is plenty of the time, particularly in sitting, we should not separate from the body. Moments of discomfort are precisely when the mind will want to take us away into some idea of how things should be, how we can make them the way we want, or why things are all wrong. We find peace not by going away from our suffering or dissatisfaction, but by completely offering ourselves to what is. There is no way to actually put into words, or to put this into words, as words inherently create ideas of things which are separate, but we can truly not separate from this body here and now. Already here, now, body and awareness are not separate things. This truth can be realized through Buddhist practice. It can take many years of meditation, or we can find all sorts of frustration on the way, but it can be realized. It is, in fact, realizing itself right now. You can't avoid it. Here at the end of his work, we are encouraged to see the way to realize this possibility of making the real promise of having our lives be just a contribution to the wellness of all things. This promise is simply to bring our whole selves to this body, this place, and this moment, here and now. I love that Ben Connolly at the end is talking about, has made a shift. And instead of this being just a solitary activity that we are engaged in, turning our light within, stepping back, stepping away from the world, that all of a sudden he is talking about making the real promise of having our lives be just a contribution to the wellness of all things. And as I've read through this book and as I read through that poem, I often think that there's something missing, or at least for me, that I miss. And that is something that Peg and Flint talk about all the time, and that they really emphasize in the teaching at Appamada. And that is that we are together. That when we say our chants on weekday mornings, we say, beings are numberless, I vow to free them. And then we say, beings are numberless, we vow to free them. That it is a shared process of discovery that we cannot master on our own, that we need each other for this. And so I want to suggest that we go into breakout rooms and that we share an experience now. And I'm going to introduce something else, which comes from a talk that Flint gave back in early April in Austin, which deserves many Dharma talks on their own. But it was a very beautiful moment when Flint was reflecting on his teachers in the past and the process of Dharma transmission for him, working with Peg and with Vicki Austin from the San Francisco Zen Center. And he said that at one point, Vicki Austin asked him about his teacher, Blanche Hartman. She asked him, "What is Blanche saying to you?" And he said, apparently without hesitation, he said, "She's telling me to take care of my mudra." So I want this to be the focus of the breakout and the shared experiment that I would like you to engage in. Think about what a mudra is. The most common mudra, I can't show it here very well, but is to make a bowl with your fingers nested inside each other and your thumb tips lightly touching each other. This is, of course, a great mindfulness exercise, since as your mind drifts away, your thumbs will fall apart or they will smash into each other, showing that you have tension in your body. And to return to that over and over again is a wonderful mindfulness experiment. But having Flint tell this story in this way, in the context of this epic journey that he was describing, of connection and connection and connection, I have been experiencing this thought of taking care of my mudra in a different way, not just as mindfulness, not just as something that I drift in and out of, but as a very energetic sharing with the world. And I feel like an energy, and I can't tell whether it is something like energy passing through me that is pouring out, or if it is energy passing through me that the world is pouring in, or if there's a difference. But here's the experiment that I want you to do. I would like to ask people to break out into groups of 2 or 3. However, there may be some, 3 is the ideal number, I think, but there may be 1 or 2 groups that can be only 2. And to take turns sitting for 2 minutes. We'll need timekeepers within the group. Take turns sitting and taking care of your mudra and seeing what effect that has on you. Let the light be shining within. Know that you're a skin bag, that everything is alive within you, that has always been alive within you, and that you are intimately connected with everything in the universe. And here you are in this moment with this willed activity to care for your mudra. And just sit with that for 2 minutes. And the other people in the group simply observe. This may not be so easy for those online. For those online, it'd be important to turn your camera on, if you can, so that the other people can be aware of your physical presence through sight of your image. And at the end of 2 minutes that you switch, at the end of, and so on, for 2 or 3 people. For groups of 2, I guess it would be 3 minutes instead of 2 minutes. And that at the end, when everybody has sat and everybody has observed, then each person take a couple of minutes to describe what it was like sitting in the presence of others with this focus on caring for a mudra. And then also the experience of observing and holding another person while they are doing that. Okay? Does that sound possible? Any questions about that? I had the wonderful experience of being in a breakout room with Marla and Maria, and they had wonderful things to say and wonderful things to share, and their presence was so great while they were taking turns sitting and while they were observing and holding me and holding each other in such a loving way. I really loved it. Any other reactions or thoughts to share with the larger group?
Appamada will have to unmute themselves if they wish to speak. But we have Genevieve who's just raised a hand.
It was, thank you, Joel. When you described it, I was like, what? And then when we did it, it was just like a joy fest. It was like each of us magnified, the peace and the joy and the softening and the flowing. And we all thought we'd feel self-conscious, but we felt held and loved, and safe. And it was awesome. I just wanted to thank you so much. It really lit me up in a most wonderful way. And it felt very relational, even when I had my eyes closed and we weren't all doing the same thing. I still felt relational all the time.
Becky, hi.
I thought it was very funny when we were given the assignment to, I'll show you your mudra if you'll show me mine. And of course, online we couldn't actually sit in a way that people could see what we were doing. And so that was part of what we did right afterwards, was to hold our hands in the air in a way that someone could see what we were doing. And we had some discussion about the variations on mudra that are what we do with our hands at all, that run throughout various traditions as well as within our own practice. And so that was pretty good too. So, but it was the intimacy of the 3 of us doing it together, facing each other, fully being with each other as part of the primary purpose of it. The intimacy of that was huge. And I thank you.
Okay, Joan.
Unmute.
You are unmuted.
Okay. Well, I think I'm hesitating, and maybe we are in our group, because we had details to work with. We couldn't get the hands placed in front of the camera, and that was something we worked on over and over, so it was taking up time. And then just comparing what was going on, looking at each other. See, nobody was totally still. It felt like I know what I was doing, and I thought, so much is going through my mind, and that's just part of life. I can't get that to go away. So we were observing things, and I know I felt that it's a really useful thing to be doing, when we're sitting to work on that idea some more of being present and letting everything fall away. But nobody does it perfectly, because your mind is always busy.
That is so true.
Yeah, somebody else may have something else to say.
Well, Joan, can I ask a question? Were you in a breakout room with other people?
Yes, and that's why I'm wondering whether someone else might like to speak. Bill did it.
Well, but my question, I have a quick question. So here you are, you're like, oh man, what am I supposed to be doing? Joel gave bad directions here. Am I supposed to have these in front of the camera or what? All these thoughts going on. Was it helpful to know that the people in your breakout room were sharing a similar experience and were holding you with care? Did you feel that? Did you feel a connection with others?
No, I had my nature, the one that's sort of bossy and controlling, was sort of helping to run the group. Sorry, but it was.
Well, thank you.
Somebody else, I'd like to hear other people.
I'd just like to say that I think when there's something about taking care of the mudra that helps me take care of everything. It's like I'm taking care of the mudra, and if I feel it slipping, I know that I'm slipping. I know that my thoughts are slipping, or that I've drifted, and then I come back to the mudra and make sure it's there again. It's kind of, and when we get still enough and really pay attention to the mudra, all the thoughts and everything begin to still, and that's when I begin to feel a real connection with others. Really, it's that, because it's everything that we are, all the habitual thinking that gets in the way of us being able to feel that connection, like Joan was talking about. It really gets in the way, and it comes up again, and then I realize my mudra slipped, so I'm back on it. It's like, take care of the mudra, and then I know that I'm present and I'm still, and it's like, and it's a wonderful thing. We do it in a Komi, that giving each other permission to just sit and look at each other. And in the world, in life, we all get on and we have conversations, but we don't really sit with each other in full presence. And just having that permission to sit and just be and just look at each other, really begin to instill a real connection, starts to submerge, starts to appear. When we get still enough to really just be present in a loving state of loving presence, when we get ourselves in a state of loving presence and to really be with another person, it's a beautiful thing to have permission to do. And I really appreciated having permission to just sit and be and not speak and just be together whilst taking care of my mudra, and I think when I really focus on my mudra, it really brings to light everything that I'm doing, and I can more easily get it out of the way than when I'm not. So I really appreciate the opportunity. It was just a wonderful, nourishing thing to do. So thank you. And who are we having next? Was it Bridget?
Bridget's hand. And then Jay, you don't want to? Okay.
Okay. Well, I found it interesting. I found it difficult to even get my mudra started because I was so conscious of feeling like I wasn't meeting the expectations of the instruction, because I couldn't arrange my camera to see my hands. And then there was an audio difficulty. So it was good to realize that what I did focus on, when I finally just captured a few seconds of sitting, I was gazing at something in my room where I was sitting that I've never gazed at before. And it reminded me of just having a fixed point of reference and looking at the just that present thing it was as if I received a glimpse of what the peace and the tranquility, and I felt supported with the presence of others, even though I was a little bit anxious and agitated. So that was good. Thanks.
Thank you, Bridget.
I don't know. Bridget talking made me raise my hand again. So, initially, as I told my group, I was concerned that if I would be self-conscious, but they exuded so much peace and love that once I started sitting, I just felt that energy and supported, right? And with my mind focused on my mudra and my posture, I couldn't think of anything else because everything was just to my mudra and being there. And once I fell into that, I was transported. So I appreciate this experience. It was marvelous for me. So I thank you. I thank you.
Genevieve?
I just wanted to say another couple things about the mudra. Focusing on it was really grounding, and I was able to really stay with it. And then, although my experience of it kept changing, and at first I felt very strongly somehow that it was a microcosm of my body. And so that there's this little body, and then there's this other body that's trying to be this, attuned to the universe and this structurally sound. And then I heard little tiny cheeps outside, and all of a sudden I had little baby birds in my hands. It was a nest. I felt it being a nest. And then the wind started really blowing, and I imagined it as the hut in the story. And I thought, this would not fall over. This is a really sound structure. So I just wanted to share. And I really appreciate being given the guidance to focus on the mudra, because that's something I'll do now.
Genevieve, wow. That was great. The birds, the wind, how astonishing and how perfect. So my apologies to everyone that I misled with my imperfect instructions, and thank you for your persistence and your willingness to engage. That's what the experiment's about, I hope. And this is just a wonderful experience for me. And has everyone heard Flint's talk from early April that he gave at the KMFA studios? So I'm gonna go back and listen to it again. But that 10-second section of it where he was talking about this felt connection with Blanche, and what she was saying to him in this very simple way. I'm sure it's an echo of something that she said to him in life, but it just seems extraordinarily meaningful to me. So, okay, well, it's now 10 o'clock. Let's finish with our service and end for today. And please know, I'm so appreciative.